Welcome to Casual Watch Talk, the podcast from the Casual Watch Reviewer YouTube channel. Join us as we talk everything watches, from watch collecting, the latest horology news and interviews. If you're not already subscribed, subscribe on your favourite podcast app. Let's dive into the show. Hello everyone and welcome back to episode 21 of Casual Watch Talk. Can you believe it's been 21 episodes, Kris? I'm amazed and I'm so glad for all the positive feedback we've been getting over on the Facebook group. So big shout out to everyone on the Facebook group. We normally start the show off with a wristwatch check. This might be the last wristwatch check that we're doing. Kris, we've been having a discussion about this. What do you think about the wristwatch check?
Yeah, we had a little discussion, and some folks on the Facebook group actually sort of pointed this out. Like, it's totally fine to have just a reasonable, regular collection, and I think that people know what you wear, people know what I have, and sort of to hear that every time, we don't want to bore you with that stuff. So it's like, I want to kind of change it to, if something changes, like if you have a big pickup or like you're excited about something, like let's talk about that. But, we don't need to go in every single time with the same stuff. So I don't want to bore our audience, but at the same time, I want to drop some of that pretentiousness. I want to drop some of that, oh, this is my fancy XYZ that you don't have. That's not us.
Yeah, I agree with you, because I think for all 21 episodes, or at least the ones that I've done with you, Kris, which is I think 17 now, it's been a combination of either the Ultimate Turtle that we made or a Citizen titanium watch, which I've been really loving whilst we've been in quarantine. So we will. Should we do a last hurrah to the watch check?
All right, sounds good. I'll start.
Go for it.
Thanks. So yes, the last hurrah, as typical, I'm wearing my everyday Bell & Ross GMT, the V2 93 GMT. Fancy, fantastic watch. Not fancy, but fantastic watch. It's my everyday watch. I have it on my wrist most times. And for those of you who follow my Instagram, Everyday Mastery, you'll see my small collection of, I have two other Bell & Ross chronographs from early times when Zinn made them. And then, I'm just, this is casual. I'm a reasonable watch collector, reasonable watch nerd. I've got a couple other things. I've got some Seiko mod stuff. I've got some other stuff, but nothing more than that. And no need to dwell on it.
Fair enough. I've been wearing my little Citizen. It's a Citizen Quartz, Citizen Land JDM version. It's interesting what you were saying about my collection is also modest. I've only really got the Tudor Black Bay 58 that you would class as luxury. And I was watching the guy who set up, there's a forum called Horology Talk, and the guy who set that up, who uses the handle Bear Clooney, he was talking about how he obsessed about particular models of Rolexes he was looking at, and he ended up collecting over 40 watches, and he almost did a YouTube video as to say that looking back on it, he thinks that's too many. Like, he thinks himself that he lusted after it. Yeah. And I'm like that. When my collection gets of a certain size, and you'll notice this on my YouTube video, I do try and trim it back. I don't know. I worry that I get, obsessive about collecting certain things. So right. I have to kind of shift my gear. And that's the good thing with watches, isn't it? That there's so much choice out of there. That's the good and bad thing about it, I think.
Yeah, listen, we love them. We enjoy having them on our wrist. We enjoy talking about them. We enjoy collecting them. But there's a healthy balance there. And I think we're both of the mind where once you get a number of them, once you get going on that, like 40, I could not even imagine. I don't want to be that person. Please stop me if I get 9 more of these. And then also, just like I said before in the podcast, I will stop Sam from building his special swatch display room. So totally healthy. I think it's going to be a new thing. We're definitely going to talk about our watch obsessions because, we're watch nerds, watch geeks, and we get onto these things. And we've had plenty of time to put stuff in our carts over the last couple of weeks and obsess about it. So Sam, why don't you tell us what you're obsessed about?
Yes, I will do. And this is not to say if you're one of those watch collectors that loves to amass a a number of watches, especially if you've got like a collecting theme and that's what makes you happy, then go for it by all means.
Exactly.
This is, just my personal view that I worry. I think it's because I feel like that the watches have like a little bit of personality and I'm sort of like leaving them out if I don't wear them. Maybe that's
right.
it. Maybe it's
right.
I mean, it would sound weird enough for me, that kind of thing, where I'm like, oh, I hope the turtle's not like really jealous that I'm taking the old Citizen out.
Yes. Anthropomorphize everything, right? When you open the watch box. And you have to, you acknowledge that.
That's a good thing with watches and watch collectors. We've all got things that we really like. I suppose my watch obsession this week, I think I might have to do like a 2-for-1 here. I've been obsessing, and I added to the cart that Yema Superman, the new quartz one. I just really like the look of it. We've been having a really interesting discussion over on the Facebook group. If you're not joined yet, please come on over to Casual Watch Talk. Request a membership, and either Kris or I will approve you. In fact, we also have another admin, Kris. There's been one interesting discussion about a watch company that up until last week I'd never heard of, Oleg and Weiss. I don't know if you'd heard of them before last week, Kris.
I've seen them. I didn't know much about them, but I've seen them.
Yeah, Stephen, who did one of these early podcasts with me, he has an Oleg and Weiss Navitimer. And I didn't realise the history of the Navitimer. I knew that they licensed it to Zinn. So Zinn made Navitimers at one time.
That's correct.
Yeah, Breitling kind of went through a liquidation or something. So Oleg and Weiss bought the old parts for the Navitimer. It's a fascinating story. Head on over to the Facebook group if you want to find out more. So, in fact, there's 3 watches, the Breitling Navitimer. Well, in fact, I guess 4. The original Breitling Navitimer, the Oleg and Weiss Navitimer, the Zinn Navitimer, which they didn't call the Navitimer, and then now the new Breitling Navitimer. It's a fascinating history about one single watch design. Instead of somebody else copying it, they were actually in their minds making the watch. It wasn't a copy of it. They're like, no, we make the Navitimer now. We have the parts, or we bought the license.
Bought the license, yeah. It was a license deal for sure for Zinn, and to this, like, they still own that license. I mean, I'm sure they still. There's some partnership there. If you're not, if you want to switch brands and you're looking for a Navitimer, like Zinn makes them just as they have. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, and I saw some of them, the Oleg and Weiss ones, on eBay for, I guess, $2.5 grand US, which is at half the price of the Breitling one.
Right. Yeah.
And a new Breitling one. So that's, but anyway, that wasn't my washer section. The Oleg and Weiss Navitimer actually went on their website, and they have another pilot's version which has very distinctive hands. So definitely check that one out. But Kris, have you had a watch obsession this week?
Yeah, same sort of connection to the Facebook group. We were talking about vintage reissues or reissued chronographs, 60s, 70s chronograph, and I stumbled upon this Tissot Heritage. Tissot Heritage 1973, Panda dial, so white dial, black inner subdials, Valjoux 7750, and our often commented watch price check site Joma Shop, who we're not don't get any sponsorship from them, and certainly just their have patronized them, but certainly we use them to sort of gauge how much something's going for. They have it on sale for $1,300, and that is a great price for that movement. And I was super tempted, but it was in the cart. But no, there's no. I wasn't going to do $1,300 yet. So, but fascinating, cool Tissot. It's a reissue, which I think is great, and it's sort of true to size, and it's got a great movement in it, and super sharp looking watch, super great looking deal.
I might catch some flack here, but I think Tissot have done a better job of reimagining their original mechanical watches than Timex, dare I say it, because I think Tissot have obviously, like the Vizio date, they put an incredible amount of thought into that and produced an unbelievable looking watch, really. I mean, it's a stunner. And they haven't then gone all out. Like, Timex kind of re-released the Marlin, and then they've kind of gone like all out, like, oh, you can get it in every color now.
Right, yeah.
Whereas Tissot seemed to have taken a step back and
I think Tissot and I think they do it even better than maybe I think they do it better than Breitling, and for reissue stuff, for vintage reissue stuff. Who else does a really good job? Longines does a really good job of their reissues, sort of keeping them true. A lot of the ones that they've had in the last couple of years. And I think that's what we want. I mean, for me, like, I would love to have a 60s diver, but it's, I'd be petrified, like an Omega, 300 60s diver, but I'm petrified to like even bring it to the beach because if it hadn't been serviced or you spend all the money on servicing, so if I was going to go for that, it would make me so much, give me so much more confidence to buy a brand new one that looked like that 1960s, 70s style, that's got all the silicone seals in it, and it's going to be no problem jumping into a pool and that sort of take. So it's very cool that companies are doing it, and I think you're right. I think Tissot's doing it better than a lot of other companies.
Interesting that you mentioned Longines there, because I saw a picture of the Longines Legend Diver, and I looked at it and I thought, oh, this must be a limited edition because they've well overdone the old radium look of that. And it wasn't. It was the original one. It was a picture of the original one. I'm like, wow, that's almost a faithful reproduction that they've done, the new Legend Diver versus the old one. Incredible job that they've done on that one.
And I think, I may be wrong, but I think they have different loom options too. I think they have it like in white, but I think of the vintage loom, I think it's well done. I don't think it's too dark, but Legend Diver, very cool watch.
Okay, guys, well, let's kick off with a few news stories, and then we're going to have a little bit of a discussion later on. Obviously, Kris and I have both been in our stay-at-home order, so we've been watching, not together, we've been watching a lot of TV with our respective wives. We've been watching a lot of TVs and movies and doing a lot of watch spotting. So let's dive into the news. I'm going to ask you what you think of these stories, Kris. So what do we think? R.I.P. Baselworld. 2021 has now been cancelled.
Baselworld, long live Baselworld. Baselworld is gone. Yeah, we sort of saw that coming anyway. Before all of this, it was on its last legs. So that's not a shock to either of us.
No, I think the last time we looked at this story, they'd postponed the 2021 and not given people their deposits back because they're like, well, it's only a postponement until 2021. And then obviously now with the cancellation of 2020 and now the cancellation of 2021, they've had to give back those. But yeah, I think unfortunately that's the end of Baselworld as we know it. Then next, have you seen this new Bremont, the BM2 watch? I'll preface this story by saying and I'd mentioned this last week, how much I really want to like Bremont. They're a British brand, British heritage, using Swiss movements, but there's a number of marketing missteps they've made, I think, and also, honestly, I struggle to equate the watches that they make with the prices that they charge for them. What I wanted to talk to you about this BM2 watch, they've made, I guess it's a hybrid between a mechanical watchmaker, a high-end luxury watchmaker, and something like Undone, where you can pick various components. So a Bremont watch typically has a 3-layer case where it has the lug part, and then there's a center section which is usually brightly coloured, whether it be orange or red, and then the top part of the case. So in this BM2 watch, you can pick the dial colour, pick what the center ring looks like, you can pick the strap, you can pick whether it has PVD coating on it. I like the idea, Kris, but they're over $5,000. Like, what do you think about that? They're using an ETA 2836 or something.
A 3-hand. This is just a 3-hand Bremont with a. It's got a inner chapter, rotating chapter.
Yes,
that's a lot of dough for a customized watch. I mean, Bremont was already on the sort of the high end of that. They seem like their prices are a little, they're definitely on the high end for what you're getting. I think they're maybe stretching it a little too much with their connection with the military and things like that here. It's my take on that.
Yeah, and a couple of the things certainly of memory, the marketing things, a long time ago they got in trouble because they said they were in-house movements when in fact they weren't. They were refinishing ETA movements, and they kind of had to backpedal that. The one that I think is most bizarre is they had Ronnie Wood, very famous, being a member of the Rolling Stones, obviously an excellent guitarist, but he's also somewhat of an artist. And it's amazing how many famous people are artists. It always amazes me that like Sylvester Stallone is quite an accomplished artist. But, I mean, a painting artist. So they had Ronnie Wood basically paint, and we've discussed this on the podcast before, they had him paint some dials for watches.
Yeah.
They're knocking these watches out for $50,000. Limited edition. And bless Ronnie Wood for being an amazing musician, but it looks almost like it's done with a Sharpie. I don't think it is, but you'll have to check those out and see whether you got a similar view to me on these.
Now, on the configuration, it's funny you mentioned it. I was just looking at Alpina, and it reminded me they have their new Alpiner, which is sing-songy alliteration, Alpiner. They have their Alpiner X. It's a anti-digi, kind of looks like some of the Breitling Emergency, Breitling Pro, Breitling Professional. And they kind of did the same thing. It's not a configurator as that I can see, but it's got, if you want the blue one, you can get the orange hands, you can get the black one with the yellow, there's like 15 different versions of it. So if you're, particular about the chapter ring color and you can get an all black one, etc. So also those are going for under $1,000. So if you want that customized style, customized color style for, I think, a little bit more affordable than what Bremont has to offer. But I don't know if mechanical. I think it's quartz. I see a lot more from microbrands, and when we were talking to the guys over at Veyer, they admitted that they want to, have these dial options and different things because it's somewhat easy for them to reconfigure. So I think it's good that microbrands are sort of driving that customize, different dials and make that easy for folks to get exactly what they want, which is great. Harder for large brands to do it. Definitely a price premium over on Bremont.
You've just reminded me of another brand, which I don't think I've ever talked about on the channel or whatever, but have you seen this brand? They're a bit like Undone. They're called WMT watches, but they specialize in, it sort of looks a bit like a Rolex Submariner, but essentially you can buy the watch and they will pre-distress it for you. So you should check that out if you want to. They've also done one that's so distressed that it doesn't come with a bezel. It's as if the bezel's been like chipped off.
Just knocked off.
Yeah, because this is going to lead to our conversation later, but one of the other famous Apocalypse Now watches was the one that Marlon Brando wore, the GMT watch that famously didn't have the bezel attached to it.
The bezel knocked off of it, yeah.
So last story here, this comes from the Facebook group, and a big shout to Kris, who's one of another Kris, who's one of our admins, but also our military expert. He pointed out the fact that Marathon are re-releasing the Navigator in steel. So they currently make this one in like a polymer, like a plastic polymer. But there was a very famous one that was called a brand that Marathon had called Andnak, which was basically Canada backwards because Marathon's a Canadian company, and they were used by the CIA. So I always knew this as like the CIA watch.
Oh, right.
I love the look of it. I'm glad they've reissued it. I'm sure it just had the marathon on it. Kris was posting on the Facebook group. He'd seen it on the Instagram.
Yeah, and it seems like it's going to be a 2021 release, and it's got. I mean, of the 12-hour bezels, that's so sharp. I love the photography, the iconography, etc. of that. Like that. That's a very recognizable watch. It's it has that like souped up military field watch work. It's good. That definitely is one of those ones that may end up in a cart and may come home.
I'm totally with you. I really like the look of this this watch. I hope they do keep the and knack on there, because I think very famous. I think in the 70s and 80s, kind of for CIA being the CIA watch. Before we dive into the main topic here, let's just pause for a very quick ad break. Hi guys, welcome back to Casual Watch Talk. Kris and I have been watching a lot of TV whilst we've been in quarantine, and we were just having a chat the other day about all the different watches that we've seen in films and in movies, and we thought, well, we might as well add this to the podcast, because I went down an interesting rabbit hole with Seikos that have been in films, but I know certainly, I guess, what other brands do you think you see, Kris? I see a lot of like Hamilton.
Yeah, Hamilton. Oh, yeah, Hamilton is kind of known for their Hollywood connections. They try to get a bunch of stuff. I mean, they're actively, I think that's part of their marketing, is actively trying to get into Hollywood for sure. JLC, IWC, definitely always the occasional Cartier.
Yes, JLC is one of the, they say this about actors, that it's hard for them to go from DC to Marvel, but JLC managed to go from DC to Marvel because there was a reverso, of course, in Batman Begins, and then you had very famous Benedict Cumberbatch with his JLC in Doctor Strange, and that was an integral part of that the plot line there. And it even got smashed. It even took one for the team there. I know certainly to your point about Hamilton. I know the new Jack Ryan series that's on Amazon. He has a Hamilton in it. Obviously, the Interstellar watch, which you were joking is almost like a Hamilton advert.
Yeah, it is, and it's also, and if you haven't seen Interstellar, it like one of the main characters is a watch. Like it is a character in the show, in the movie.
And it's amazing, isn't it, that Hamilton made a custom watch for that
and interesting, they came right out immediately after they had the watch that McConaughey wore. And then everyone was pressuring him to make that Merv watch, and it was funny because they made it screen accurate, and so there's a whole bunch of folks that like totally appreciate the fact that like this is exactly the one that you see on the screen kind of thing. And then there are a whole bunch of people who are like, oh, but it's 42 millimeters, it's too big, and you're like, oh. Like, we made exactly what you wanted.
It's funny, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit of a back and forth there, but very cool that they at least, that they were open to that they made it. I mean, that it's a sort of part of that movie. Cool.
Yeah, I agree. And the reason I think they made it so big for the film was that, in fact, they used parts from different Hamilton watches, but it was mechanized so that the hands would spin at a very fast rate.
Mm-hmm. So they could control it. Yeah.
Yeah, for that part of that story. And of course, there was the Hamilton, is it called the Black Ice or something? There's a completely PVD one that was used in The Martian as well. And then very famously, there was Hamilton's in 2001: A Space Odyssey. Men in Black had the sort of the Elvis-like Hamilton.
The Elvis style, or sort of a reissue of that. Yeah, no, lots. Now, Sam, I don't know if you do this, but my wife now is. I guess she sort of expects it when we're watching anything now, when I see 2.5 frames of a wrist watch or something on a main character, and I will pause it and then stand up and to go look at the, go look at the screen in high definition. Yeah. My wife now is like, all right, gonna pause to look at the watch kind of thing. So she's used to it now. I don't know if you do that or how many of our listeners do that, but
I don't do that, but I joke about how ever since I found out about Net Movie Database, I don't think I've ever watched a film, unless it's been in a cinema. I don't think I've ever watched a film at home where I haven't gone on IMDb to check out the actors. And there is a similar IMDb for watches, or a lot of forums. So if you're ever wondering, I've been watching a new TV series that I love called Westworld, and very famously, one of the main characters in that has a planet ocean. And then in the third series, there is a watch there's a watch that's an integral to the storyline, but it's not like a real watch. It's artificial intelligence that the guy wears on his wrist. But it's fascinating that even when it's set 100 years in the future, people are still using, I guess you would class it as a smartwatch, but...
yeah, well, that's good. They're still wearing wristwatches in the future. So that's good. You were talking about Jack Ryan. Something similar that we've that I've been gone back to watch. Do you remember the show Burn Notice? Came out like in the early, 2007 maybe, something like that.
I do remember it because I'm a big fan of Bruce Campbell, but I don't think I really watched it.
Yeah, Bruce Campbell's in it, and it's surprising. It's one of those shows that we just like to have on in the background kind of thing, and it's fun. It's got spy antics, right? And I never realized how many. So the main character, Michael Weston, he's got a watch that he's wearing, the Special Forces watch. It's like a Chase Dewar. I don't know if I heard that the brand was sort of defunct now, but it's this, super iconic. It's got this giant bezel and it's got this yellow and red, I think it's small seconds on it, or at least the chronograph timer on it. Super, super recognizable.
Oh, that's interesting. Obviously, we've talked about Hamilton, which you see in loads of films. Obviously, Rolex you see in just loads of films. John Wick, of course, had that Carl. I used to say Carl Basher, but
Basher, yeah.
I actually went into Tonneau, the watch reseller over here. Is it Tonneau? And they said, "Oh no, it's Carl Butcher or Butcher or something." And they actually, but no, he said that family actually own a stake in Tonneau, the watch company.
Oh, I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, the reseller, similar to Richemont and Watch Pro, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you obviously see a lot of Rolex in films. We've talked about Hamilton, but I was amazed, and I went down a bit of a rabbit hole when I knew we were going to be looking at this segment, about how many films Seiko is in. I mean, it's amazing, really, if you think about it, especially going back, well, right through the 70s and 80s. It was a real heyday for Seikos in film. Of course, most notably in Aliens, the very famous watch that they had in Aliens. In fact, there was a couple of different Seikos in the Aliens franchise of films. The very famous Apocalypse Now watch, the 6105, which was worn by Martin Sheen's character, and they are re-releasing that watch, although they're not calling it the Apocalypse Now watch, are they? They're kind of re-releasing it in the black version and also a green version.
One of the ones that I saw on the list that I didn't catch was The Abyss. It's great submarine movie, great, deep sea diving. And Ed Harris has a 6309, which is I believe the predecessor to the Turtle. So on wrist, on scene, pretty cool.
Yeah, I remember that. And of course, Ed Harris is in Westworld as well, which is pretty cool. And do you think it's fair that when you look at these, you see like top watches in films, they always have Apollo 11 and the Speedmaster, but they haven't picked that for the film. I mean, that's historically, they're just following what was the historically accurate.
Yeah. And speaking of Ed Harris, I think you see a lot of the Omega dress watches in that as well. So I'm not sure what Ed Harris was wearing as his character in Apollo 13, but
Arnold Schwarzenegger's very famous in Predator, the H558, which Seiko re-released. So this is the Annie Digi. I thought it was also in Commando, but I couldn't find a reference to it, so I'm sure somebody can correct me on that.
I feel like he wore it in more than one because it was his personal, and I think he wore it in more than one film. But yeah,
and you'll never see a cooler wrist shot than when he's holding that machine gun with the. And if it is in Commando, then there's that scene, isn't there, where he holds up the rocket launcher.
Right.
That was a cool scene. And did you know, this is one of the rabbit holes I went down, that watch wasn't first worn by Arnold Schwarzenegger in a film. Roger Moore wore it in, let me look at the film here. So Roger Moore wore it in A View to a Kill.
Okay. James Bond?
One of his, James Bond. So it was a Bond watch before it was a Predator Arnold Schwarzenegger watch. And in fact, they had a good run, Seiko, with James Bond films. Of course, in Octopussy, they had the famous the TV watch, which really did play TV, but you needed like a ginormous kind of separate receiver. And
Like
if you've not seen that, Seiko, yeah, exactly. But in that film, obviously, he had like full color television on it, which wasn't accurate. And then there was also another Seiko in that film, which was a Seiko 0757. Now, I remembered that I couldn't think of the scene, but as soon as I saw a picture of it, I remembered it. If you remember, in one of the scenes, he gets a sort of a fax on his watch, and it's on a tiny little strip of paper that he pulls out. So that was a very famous Seiko in there.
Yeah.
Of course.
Watch does not actually fax.
I know. Imagine in the how much battery life that would take. I mean, we joke about smartwatches now, but sending a fax to a watch.
Whew, I know. Little coin cell battery.
Yeah, well, I had one of those in my when I had that pager watch. That I had a Swatch pager watch, which I did actually use back in the day when it was a pager.
Some 90s street cred right there.
And then Seiko also, this was another surprise to me. In For Your Eyes Only, another Roger Moore, I can't remember seeing this watch, but I'm going to have to go back and rewatch it. Apparently, the Golden Tuner was in it, the Seiko Golden Tuner, the original one.
Oh.
The quartz one.
Wow.
Yeah, I was pretty amazed by that. I'm going to have to go back and watch that now.
Yeah. I want to watch Westworld. I went back and I rewatched Apollo 13. That's a great movie, by the way. It holds up.
Great film.
and it's I know more about the space, and it's really accurate. So it's good.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how many times you watch that, you still get anxious towards the end, don't you? About, are they going to make it back, even though you know that they are?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So interesting adding a bunch of stuff to watch in isolation based on watch spotting. So I hope we've added to some of our listeners' lists.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I've got a few more as well to add to the list. If anybody, I'm not a huge fan of the Seiko SKX009. I've made no bones about it in the past, but it does feature in a film. Very famously, Robert Redford wore the SKX009, and that features in quite a few scenes. In fact, when I did my review of the 009, I spliced in some of the footage. There's a lot of keen watch enthusiasts that have managed to capture on YouTube, so definitely check that out.
And he had it on a NATO, right?
Very famous. You're right. He very famously had it on a blue NATO, which if you've ever put an SKX009 on a blue NATO of that color, it looks awesome.
It does. It's good. Sharp.
And then the last one that I had was, I mean, there's so many, isn't there? So many iconic watches. Also in James Bond, they had the watch. I didn't realize it was in James Bond. I always knew this as, did you ever play the video games Metal Gear Solid?
A little bit.
So there's a famous watch in Metal Gear Solid. It's the Seiko G7575020 Sport.
Mm-hmm.
And they made a Metal Gear Solid limited edition watch. Metal Gear Solid, if anybody's played it, is set in the 80s, or some of it is set in the 80s. So he has this watch which is very 80s, but this also appeared in Octopussy as well, this watch. Very distinctive, the way it looks.
Looking at the range, that Seiko range from that era, I think it's like they wanted to be in all the super futuristic movies. I mean, that LCD for that is super iconic. It's got this like square that's sort of off-centered, and yeah, it definitely whatever Seiko did, they nailed the watches from the future in the 1980s and 90s.
It was amazing, wasn't it? And this is the good thing, I suppose. And I've just checked, I got one of the earlier watches wrong. The watch that sent the fax was the Seiko 0674LC. So I'll stand corrected there. But yeah, and this is the good thing as well. If you really like those films from the 80s, unlike now, if you saw a watch in a film now, it's likely that it's going to be quite expensive, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Or built for the film, aka Hamilton, as we talked about.
Exactly, like but if you're a Bond fan, then definitely try and track down one of these older Seikos. You know, it's not like you're going to have to buy an Omega Seamaster or whatever. You could certainly build a collection of these iconic watches.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's a lot that we've missed there, Chris. What do you think? We've probably missed hundreds. There's probably people shouting in their cars at this podcast. What about that famous watch?
Yeah, for sure. But it was just, I think it was a good sort of like what we were thinking about and coming up with and rewatching. Maybe some of the ones that are not as known for. Maybe we gave you guys some ideas.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's so many like very common ones. There's so many ones that are well known. Like obviously the two-tone gold one that was in Rolex that was in American Psycho, and then the Sopranos had a gold Rolex.
And there are thousands of hours of YouTube videos of all of the Bond watches. So if you're definitely can go down that rabbit hole as well.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us again. Please join us over on the Facebook group. We're having a lot of fun. There's a lot of cool conversation on there. We've got some regular posters, so a big thanks to Rob and Luke and Lee and everyone that's been, and Kris, who's been posting regularly, keeping the conversation going. We really appreciate it. So thanks again for joining me, Kris.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on Casual Watch Talk. Thanks, guys. Bye.